the 49ers are hosting the Green Bay Packers in a rematch of Week 12's blowout at Levi's Stadium. And Niners won 37-8. Aaron Rodgers had averaged 3.2 yards per attempt, which was the lowest of any start in his career. He's had a pretty good career. And it was the last time the Packers lost a game. The Packers and Seahawks played the most predictable Packers and Seahawks game in Lambeau Field that I can remember. Which is, I mean, it was funny. Like, the Packers go up 21-3 at halftime. And I don't know about you, but I had absolutely zero doubt in my mind that the Seahawks were going to make it a one-score game at some point.
Oh, that was 100% happening.
That's exactly what ended up happening. Similar to the Niners-Seahawks game where the Niners went up big in the first half. The Seahawks had no points in the first half and then reeled off 3 straight touchdown drives. They did the same exact thing, except it was a little bit less dramatic because the Seahawks score 3 straight touchdown drives to open the second half, just like they did against the Niners in Week 17. And then Pete Carroll decides to punt with 3 minutes left?
That was I want to say it's unbelievable, but it's Pete Carroll, so it's not.
It's peak Pete Carroll. And it's peak like old school defensive coaches. That's kind of what they do.
Yep.
It was 4th and 11 at the Seahawks 36 after Wilson was sacked on 3rd and 5. I mean, look, they had all their timeouts, but there was 2:41 left in the game. That's brutal. Anyway, Aaron Rodgers has...
Dude, it's so bad.
Well, we don't need to talk about the Seahawks, thankfully. I was secretly hoping, I guess it's not a secret, but I was hoping that the Packers would win because...
Yeah, you openly said that on the podcast.
Yeah, I've written a lot about the Seahawks this year in the 2 games, and like it would have been really difficult from a content originality perspective to dive back into what makes the Seahawks a tough matchup for the Niners. So I am relieved that it's the Packers because I think it's a more interesting game from a storyline perspective, and that's obviously subjective because some people find the Niners Seahawks thing still interesting. Anyway, Aaron Rodgers makes a couple ridiculous throws, including a long one to Davante Adams to convert a 3rd down, and then another one to Jimmy Graham. I know the spot was controversial, but Aaron Rodgers 16-27, 243 yards, no interceptions. Just doing Aaron Rodgers stuff. I mean, Davante Adams, 8 catches on 11 targets for 160 yards, 2 scores. Aaron Jones had 2 scores, 21 rushes, 62 yards. I mean, it was the most predictable, just the way the game went. As soon as the Packers went up big, I was like, well, this is going to be a 1-score game either way. The Seahawks could pull it out, but ultimately it was the Packers. And I think all the injury issues that Seattle had, whether it be at running back or along the offensive line or at tight end, they had one of their, 3rd or 4th receivers dropped a crucial pass on that last drive, I think just before that punt that we mentioned. I ultimately think that their lack of roster depth and maybe their defensive struggles that have been pretty prevalent throughout the season just kind of came back to finally, everything sort of came to roost. Like the fact that the Seahawks had a +7 point differential for the entire season sort of indicates that maybe they weren't as good as a lot of 11-win teams have been, and they just had Russell Wilson, which had been the reason. But
and I think that's the biggest issue. And I know this isn't a Seahawks podcast, but it felt like watching that game last night. If their offense had originated in even like the 2010s instead of the 1960s, like they'd be a lot better. And it feels like Russell Wilson doing things is a total accident. I remember Troy Smith had a game for the 49ers where he threw for like 330 yards. And Mike Singletary said after the game, like, yeah, that's something we got to look at and fix. And I feel like that's how Pete Carroll views it. Russell Wilson does something. He's like, whoops, take that out of the playbook. And that it feels like they didn't use him until it was too late last night. And that's probably good for the 49ers because I think the Packers are way better than the Seahawks. But
Mm-hmm.
I think because of what we saw last night and what you said, like Russell Wilson's super dangerous all the time, and it feels like no lead is ever safe. And the Seahawks just managed to stick around in games. And the fact that Niners don't have to deal with that is probably a good thing.
Yeah, we have a group text chat with a couple other people, and one thing I mentioned I threw in there yesterday was that I think the Packers are better than the Seahawks, but I think the 49ers would still rather play the Packers.
Yes.
And I think that's true because of familiarity. Obviously, the two teams played a couple weeks ago. They played twice this season. The Seahawks had already beaten them. They know Russell Wilson is the most dangerous guy in the field. Really, at any point in the game, even if he's down by 3 scores at halftime, he's capable of putting drives together. When the Seahawks actually decide to call passing plays and not try to establish the run, like you mentioned. I mean, the Packers are good, man. Like they went 13-3. I know the Niners blew them out, and a lot of 49ers fans are going to be very comfortable, predicting the 49ers to win big. And I do think that there's a decent chance